But I did want to ask you a question about, new Civs. Obviously, this last patch, I'm sure you've answered this 1,000 times, so 1,001 isn't going to hurt. But how do you decide new Civs, and what was the process like?
So when we add new Civs, the first thing we always do is we need to have a bit of a common theme. So we try to look, okay, we don't want to add, I don't know, Inca on one side and then Burmese on the other side. That's not a package.
Right, that makes no sense.
Exactly. You want a bit of a connection. And if those civilizations also historically met in the past, that's even more interesting, because then you have something that's, in the campaigns, you can tell the story about it, etc. So that's the first thing. Specifically for Lords of the West, one that just came out, we decided, hey, we want to go back to Western Europe. We haven't done that in a long time. Actually, we really haven't focused that much on it. We kind of went to Africa, we went to Southeast Asia, then we went back to Central Asia, and we were like, okay, most of the people at Forgotten Empires live in Europe. Let's do something European again. That's the first step. But then it's about, okay, first of all, history. What's left? There's so many civilization Age of Empires already. What's still there? Right. What's still there? And then we kind of look at a lot of things at the same time. First of all, stories. Are there interesting stories for the Civs that are still left? What about their name recognition? For example, if you have the Huns, you have Attila the Hun, and you're like, yeah, everybody knows Attila the Hun by now. Let's put him in there. Then you can look at interesting gameplay concepts, or just historical units that are interesting. For example, I'm just trying to think out loud here.
No.
I'm trying to think of what is one of the coolest units that we added recently. Looking at the. Sorry, I'm waffling.
Yeah, you have a tech tree in front of you that you're looking at.
I have a page open. I was doing some writing earlier.
Ballista elephant. I don't know. Is that early?
Perfect example. Yeah. That's like a staple unit that people know. It's so impressive, and you're like, I want to have that in Age somehow. So for the Khmer, the Ballista elephant was indeed a perfect example of a very famous unit. And then we kind of just look at all those criteria and see, okay, let's say Burgundians, they get 1 point for the interesting storyline. Bang. They get 0 points for name recognition. Bang. They get 2 points because they fought with a lot of other nations or factions in Age of Empires. Bang, 2 points. And then at the end we see, okay, what Civ makes the most sense? What Civ scored the most imaginary points to be added to the game?
That's very interesting. And then you added a bunch of new features, which are extremely new to Age of Empires. The charge feature on the cavalry. What other? That seems like such a massive jump for the franchise. Did you have that envisioned at the early stages? Because these new additions are drawing from other RTS games, right?
Well, the reality is at this point that everything has been done before. That is the reality when it comes to these little features. We didn't really take inspiration from any specific games. We were like, yeah, charge attack is something, you have seen it somewhere before, and it's a fun mechanic, and we were thinking it can work in Age. Let's try to figure out how it can work. Especially because we were, okay, Burgundy, that's cavalry. We need to have something unique with cavalry. We have so many cavalry units in the game already, so we need to make sure that whatever the Burgundians have is something novel and unique. So we played around with it. And one of the reasons that we do these things is because we noticed that people like to have bonuses and features in their civilizations that are novel. The more, I'm going to say, run-of-the-mill a civilization is, usually the more balanced, at least at first, but at the same time also not super exciting for a lot of people. They're like, oh, that's another bonus that makes something cheaper or that gives me a certain economy bonus. But if you add a different way of playing, like with the charge mechanic, where you have to kind of hit and run much more often, that is something that we've noticed that people who play Age just appreciate a lot more.
How hard is it to balance then these new things that are, completely new to the AOE genre or the AOE 2 franchise? Like, these are brand new mechanics.
It is. At first, it's completely broken. Like the first iterations we do are just like busted.
It's like a car. It's like the blue car.
Yeah,
going around killing everything.
It's like, okay, this is broken, but that's fine. Like, it's the first iteration, right? And then when it's released, we try to keep things a little bit too strong, because we know that these civilizations still need to be figured out. These mechanics still need to be figured out. Sometimes we overshoot it, like with Definitive Edition, we had the humans added, and they had a win rate of close to 70% or something. That's
right.
Way too high.
Yeah,
that was wrong, but that was fixed quite shortly after. And that's also important to know. Like, we're doing support for the game. We want to give people the opportunity to try out the new civilizations. And if something is overpowered or too strong, or underpowered, we'll just adjust it in the next patch.
What goes into the balancing process? How much are you looking at the win rate? How much are you looking at pro games? Because I feel like that itself is a difficult thing to juggle. What's the most important part of balancing?
That's both are equally important, actually. So we look always at the overall win rate. So is a Civ... when we look at win rates, just to clarify some numbers here, when we look at win rates, we try to look at making sure that every civilization is between 45 and 55% win rate. That's kind of our goal. Every Civ that's kind of between those numbers is good.
At any skill level? Or you're saying, okay.
At any skill level. And then we say, okay, what if we just look at pro games? So we say, like, okay, only games that are above a certain elo. And then we look at those percentages again. Are we again between 45 and 55? And if we are, then we feel quite good about it. You can filter higher. You can say, like, okay, we just want to look at the top 100 players. At which point you get a lot less games, so the percentages jump a bit. It's also a bit like, I don't know, if you have somebody like the Viper and he's like, oh, for a week I'm going to play nothing but humans.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so good that he can play everybody with humans for a week.
Right.
So there's a bit of that you need to keep in mind. But those are kind of the numbers we look at. But to your point, we also look at tournaments and see, like, okay, this specific strat looks a bit broken, or this Civ is always banned because of this. And then we also try to make adjustments there.
That's interesting. What about between game modes? Because you also have different game modes, you have different maps, you know, there's so many different things you can look at here analytically.
Yes, indeed. We also look at maps, but the good, or actually, I'm going to say the good thing, but the reality is that most people play Arabia. It's by far the most popular map, at least for competitive players, Arabia. For casual players, Black Forest, top favorite. And that's also great, but we mostly look at Arabia for that.
You don't want to look at Fat Slob's Black Forest numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like
with the Vikings.
You can't really base balance on forest stopping or anything.
What if a Civ is like a very good water Civ, and you know it's high win rate on the water map? You look at that and you say, okay, well that's kind of what we want here, right?
We try to look at it, but so the most important is always Arabia, because it's by far the most competitive map. But then we can also filter and say, like, okay, what are the water maps of this month? Let's filter on those, see what the win rates are there. And if there are outliers, for example, we had that with Italians recently. Italians are still an outlier in water, where they're much better, and on land where they're much worse. So what we did is we kind of nerfed one of their water bonuses and boosted one of their land bonuses. And that was in the patch that was released last week, I think. And we already see in the numbers, like, this is having an effect. Like, they're dropping a tiny bit in water, they're rising a tiny bit on land. So it's also good to see that we have this almost live data to look into and see like, oh, this nerf or this boost that we just gave has an effect and has the intended effect, or maybe it doesn't.
Right. That's cool. What about, this is maybe a off kind of topic question, but what about consulting the older developers and older guys? Because actually I found a pretty little wholesome comment in one of the YouTube videos. Sandy Peterson, he's a former AOE developer. So someone basically said they got an idea for the double crossbow through one of his videos, and he seemed pretty delighted to, you know, give any input or feedback needed. So how much consulting do you do with old developers?
We have actually not had a chance to talk to the old designers. We were in touch with a few older developers, like some graphics artists. I think we even had a chance to talk to some of the audio people, but not with the designers. And it would have been great, but I think at the same time, a lot of them have also said, like, I'm just curious where Age goes next. Like, this is a chapter.
This is your baby now. You take it over and see what you can do with it, right?
I don't know. Like, I kind of wonder that myself. Like, I still consider it their baby. Like, and we take care of it now. So I do sometimes wonder, like, do they still look at it? Do they still play at it? But they definitely keep a distance, and they don't come and weigh in and say like, oh, that's a bad decision or that's a cool decision. That's and I think that's a very respectful approach.
I mean, I think you've warranted that respect with how successful Age of Empires is, and you know how good the game is right now. It's literally at its probably peak, maybe not considering its boom in, you know, early release days. So I think that's a fair perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea on player numbers back in the day. Back in the day, that wasn't tracked, right? You couldn't go to Steam and see how many people were playing the game. But I think last week we were in the top 25 of Steam, and that's like
crazy. That's insane. Yeah,
that just blows your mind, and it's just, I think you said it at the beginning as well. Like, the community in Age is just so good.
Yeah,
like such a nice community, and that probably invites people to stick around and keep on playing. And
there's many toxic places online in gaming, but AOE is not one of them. There's from the top to the bottom. I mean, maybe you'll get some rude person matchmaking once in a while, but like peanuts on the right.
Yeah.
The Bored With Nelly podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and pretty much every platform known to man, except MySpace. Why the hell would it be on MySpace, you weirdo? Full episodes can be found on the official Bored With Nelly YouTube page.